Hey guys, welcome back to the Freedom Kickstarter podcast. So today's episode we have Sam McKenzie. As always, I'm going to throw it over to the guests to introduce themselves. So Sam, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
My name's Sam McKenzie. I run a company called Science to Health, nutrition and health consultancy. And we basically help provide cutting edge science to the general public and elite athletes in the form of scientific testing and nutrition coaching.
Love it. So I think one thing a lot of people will be interested in is the fact that there you said, you work with a lot of elite athletes. And I think for a lot of people in nutrition and fitness and health, that's the dream, right? No one gets into it because they particularly want to work with Barbara, who's 56, who wants to lose 5 pounds. So how did you get into doing that and working with athletes like that?
I started studying nutrition and nutrition science from when I was 16 at college. I wasn't too sure of what I wanted to do. I just knew I loved sport and science, so I studied sports science. And within that, I got introduced to nutrition. And that was when I just found working with athletes fascinating, but I also found the human body fascinating. And then I knew I wanted to work with people. And years on, I still get told now by business coaches that I need to kind of focus on one area, niche down as it were, but I can't. I want to work with everybody. I just find different parts of it interesting and I enjoy it all.
I love that. And I know you mentioned beforehand that you said nutrition is the one thing you know about and you're not, a business guy, but obviously you've done pretty well for yourself from a business standpoint from maybe breaking a few rules and not doing things the conventional way. So how did you get into it? Like, was it just purely a follow your passion thing and help people? Was there any strategy behind it? Like, what was the journey from being at school, knowing that this is kind of what you want to do to where you are now?
I would say I would always have had a potential to be an entrepreneur. I used to, as a kid, I used to set up whenever I wanted new toys or new gadgets. I'd get all my old stuff, clean it all up, go and do I was probably 10 at this time. Go on a public road near my street where everybody would be passing and set up a little stall, make as much money as I could, and then kind of rinse and repeat. And my mum was more than happy to let me do that because of the skills that I was learning. And yeah, that still sticks today when I see people who I used to hang around with, their mum and dad still remind me of that today. So there was that with the love for health and coaching. And then when I set up, I just started from the ground up in making sure that I was working with people who I cared about. So there was certainly sincerity there in wanting them to do well. And then I think that was the main driver in it, really. In that, yeah, probably if a business coach looked at my business from 2017, probably see multiple holes in it. But I think at the heart of what it was ethically right. And I think from the general public point of view, when they're looking in, people can see that of when it's sincere or not.
Yeah, massively. And we were talking about this off camera a bit before in terms of a lot of the time you get business advice that is probably theoretically correct, but it doesn't work for other people's businesses, right? You'll get a business coach says you must scale or you must build a team, or in your case, you must niche down. And actually, if it's inauthentic, that just doesn't work. So what was the process of you getting clients? Because were you a lecturer beforehand as well?
Yes. So when I finished university, I then did a master's and a teaching qualification, a PGCE, qualified as a teacher, and then I worked at the college that I started at. And as much as I loved teaching, and I still do today, I was just missing that bit of actually working with people on the front line, so to speak. I wanted to be in the elite teams, working with the top athletes, working with business owners, mums and dads, and I wasn't doing that. So to me, I wasn't fulfilling my potential or my passion. And that's when I decided to leave that area. And still, even though I suppose I am still teaching today, but it's just in a different format that more fulfills what I want to achieve.
And how did you start working with more elite athletes?
So after I did the lecturing job, I worked for a medical company. So that was mainly corporate. So I'd be going into businesses and doing talks on nutrition and then doing testing, blood test analysis and educating people on that side. And then as I was in that job for about 2-3 years, and I just started messaging athletes on Instagram, or it might have been Facebook back then, and just offering them advice. for free. Back then there was a lot of weight cutting athletes that kind of were still in the dark ages with nutrition, and I was still very much in touch with the upcoming research in this area, and I wanted to apply that, to the real world, and it wasn't really getting through at the grassroots of boxing, MMA, wrestling, and I just started helping a couple with some nutrition, and then it just went from there, and then more athletes came along, bigger names, and yeah, it just started from the ground up there.
Nice. Let's dive into some of the myths, because that's something I think would be really interesting to cover, is the whole, you've mentioned before about misinformation and, all that kind of stuff. So with something like weight cutting and those sort of practices, what sort of things were you seeing that people were doing that you were just like, no, that's either wrong or it's dangerous or it could be optimized? Like, give us an idea of that.
So let's talk boxing, for example. A coach would usually be imparting the information to the athlete, and the coach wouldn't necessarily, kind of inherently be doing wrong. They're just showing you how they know it, and that usually comes from their coach and the person who coached them, and it goes back generations. And most of it is not scientifically supported. But I don't say that in a negative way. I just say that is the coach trying to do their best by the athlete. But some of the things that I've seen is, people losing over 20 pounds in 24 hours. I've seen recently a wrestling coach in Ukraine with a load of wrestling athletes who are 8 years old in the sauna, in there till they're crying and not letting them out, or telling them that they can't get out. There's still some serious stuff that goes on that absolutely should not be happening, and the science is actually there to stop it happening. There is wiser approaches and methods, but they're still not being used. So like what's the saying? Old habits die hard, and that's still very much the case. And when a scientist comes into the area to try and improve things, some coaches are very open-minded to it, and it's like, yeah, if you can make this better and have that impact, it's all for the greater good. Some are absolutely dead against it, even though they may be able to see physically that athlete struggling in their mental health, physical health. They will still say, yeah, but it works, so we're not changing it. And that is what you're up against.
I certainly remember my fleeting experience with bodybuilding around like 2014, 15, I think. And you had athletes then dehydrating themselves and doing, ridiculous water cuts and all this kind of thing. And I was thinking, it's one thing doing that when you have to go and stand on a stage for half an hour and pose, which is quite physically demanding. It's a whole other thing doing it when you've got an opponent who's potentially going to try and punch you in the head. Like, I'm not an expert in it, but that to me seems crazy to do, like a severe water cut, to go and do hours and hours of exercise the day before to deplete your carb stores and stuff, to potentially then go and have someone else want to kill you. It's, again, maybe that's my uneducated opinion, but it just seems, as an outsider, it seems absolutely mad that people would do that.
No, I wouldn't say that's uneducated opinion. I'd say that's fact. It literally is like that. And yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned massively from this is the difference between theory and practice. There's a lot of research out there saying where fighters should be 1 week out from the weigh-in and what's optimal, what's ideal. But then there's real life, and it doesn't work out the way that it does on paper, so to speak. There's athletes that if I don't agree to help them, they're going to do it anyway, with or without me. And in my view, I'd rather be there and helping them do it in a safe way with medical supervision. But it's a difficult reality, and there's a lot of risks that come with it.
Sticking with something like weight cutting then, what does actually work if you're working with a client? And I know every case will be different, but your average person, they come to you, they say, right, I need to lose, I don't know, you can tell me what's average, but I need to lose 10 pounds in the last week before a fight. I'm thinking of doing these dangerous tactics. What would you recommend instead?
Yeah, there's so many dangerous tactics, even just to, put them off the bat is laxatives. Don't touch them. The crazy workout routines that is putting the body in insane stress. Depleting kind of electrolytes in your body before you've even started the cut. Even some athletes using alcohol to try and dehydrate. And what we're trying to do is manipulate the body stores that we know we can with minimizing harm or risk to the body best we can. There's thresholds with that in terms of how far we can push people. I don't think the thresholds are the same, even though there's research out there that says try to keep athletes no higher than between 8 and 10% away from the weight 1 week out. Some athletes can do way more than that. Some are even can't do 10%, and that's within the recommended guidelines from research. It's very individual. But the methods that I would usually stick with on 1 week out would be they would arrive at that 1 week out being very heat acclimated. So they will have been exposed to certain temperatures, getting the body used to sweating. So then there's lots of physiological adaptations there to protect them. It's not new to the body. Then we manipulate salt, water levels, glycogen levels, and the body fat will be low enough from the leading weeks up to that we are within touching distance from using their methods. And that should see us there.
Like, it's all very safe, very sustainable. Do you kind of keep quite close tabs on them during that week? Is there anything you particularly measure?
Yeah, so there's, depending on who the fighter is, that will dictate which methods that we use and how big the cut is as well. But yes, we're measuring all vitals, we're measuring hydration levels. In some cases, we're even measuring bloods if that particular fighter's got a previous history of difficult weight cuts. And the more we do, the more we get to know them. And that'll usually dictate the testing protocols that we'll use.
Got it. And then in a wider perspective, we touched a bit on misinformation and people doing stupid stuff. I'm sure there's probably no end to this, but what other sort of unscientific things do you see people doing, maybe in like a wider context, even with sort of people, general day-to-day recreational athletes? Is there anything that you see that you just scratch your head and think, what on earth are you doing?
Oh, there's so many. There's so many even
Well,
thinking
we've
on
got
the spot.
time, so.
Yeah. Detoxing, just unnecessary restriction, unnecessary suffering. I think that there is an element for any development in any walks of life. I think there is an element of suffering needed, but then I think the worst one is unnecessary suffering, as in you can actually do without that and still get to the destination that you want to get to. And that's where I come in, when I see people doing these detoxes, over-consuming, water, even like kind of water loading to crazy amounts, kind of the many supplements and things like that promise fat loss, and it just takes away from the premise of what the science is already there. It's just for whatever reason not getting through to the masses, and which I know we'll come on to this, but I don't think at the minute social media, I think it's a big driver of that in keeping people away from the truth.
And detoxing, sorry, what do you tend to see there? Will it be like I've heard people do like the alkaline stuff, taking certain things in the morning, the old, was it lemon juice and cayenne pepper? I'm sure there are tons of supplements. Like what's the main culprit that you're seeing at the moment for that?
Yeah, like you said there, alkaline water. There's even I've even had clients that have spent thousands of pounds on a water dispenser that was, an alkaline water dispenser. And if you've not obviously got the knowledge to know what happens in the body, these sales pitches are very powerful. It's crazy to me that this information isn't regulated, as in companies and should be not allowed to say some of these things, when the truth of the matter is that if you drink alkaline water, it's neutralized in the stomach. It doesn't get past the stomach. So how on earth can it have an impact on anything beyond that in terms of blood, any of the other biological systems? Because the body has to regulate its pH. If it doesn't, you're dead. And your liver and kidneys have been doing that all your life. It's just overkill and unnecessary as well. Never mind people spending thousands on it when they could actually spend that money and that time on other areas that are well established in science and get way more bang for the buck. Yeah. But this has been going years, this alkaline water, and it doesn't look like it's stopping. And usually they go in cycles, starts and stops, and the next one comes in and then it usually returns, a bit like fashion in a way.
Yeah, certainly doing a lot of work in the supplement field from a copywriting perspective back in the day, I definitely saw a lot of that. And I had certain levels that I wouldn't go to in terms of products that people wanted me to promote and that kind of thing. I think kind of much like yourself, sometimes it was a case of thinking, well, people are going to buy this anyway, or they're going to buy something. But yeah, some things that I was asked to write copy for, couldn't do because of the health background I had, albeit not nearly as extensive as yours. I could still see, right, this is just a load of crap, to put it plainly. And people will spend the money on what they want to, but at the same time, I can't consciously promote something that is just utter nonsense and potentially even dangerous. I think it's that whole thing of whether it's physically dangerous or whether it just sells people false hope. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of that I see just from in every industry, but particularly in nutrition, I suppose.
And where do we draw the line? You know, there's so much marketing, but not enough supporting science. Otherwise, if everybody was just listening to the marketing, imagine how many supplements they'd be taking. Yeah. You know, but I do go into appointments like that where people bring the supplements, and I'm wondering how they're not spewing them up when they've had them because they're taking that many. And I just think, 70% of this can go because it's doing nothing. Some people take that really well. Some people are the complete opposite. But there's a lot where there's zero scientific support and way more marketing. I think that's where the kind of the mismatches between the two, the disparity between the two.
Who do you see as the main culprits for this? Why are people believing such outlandish claims, do you think?
Well, it's not just some of the supplement companies. Obviously, it's their interest to sell, these products. And there are actually some good ones out there as well that will not make claims unless they're scientifically supported. They're actually investing at the research level to try and find these answers out. Even some investing in even knowing that they might not get the answer they want. I think that's fair. But there are also some gurus, if we can call them that, on Instagram, going on podcasts. No issue with podcasts because there's many great ones as well. But there are some rogue ones where information's coming out and it's just inherently wrong. There's a vested interest from the person, where there might be a financial interest in something and it's going out to millions of people. And some of the things that it's the client's educating me now in terms of I've heard this and then it's news to me because I can't keep up with all these places that they're hearing these different things from. But then you can always come back to the science on navigating it in terms of, okay, right, this claim you've made, let's go and look at that. I've no idea where that claim's come from because there is nothing on it. Yeah. And you can only resort to the fact that it's been made up. Yeah. As crazy as that sounds, some people look at you like you've got three heads because they're like, it can't be true because such and such a body said it on Instagram. So that has now become like a justified kind of proof, if you like, when, it's not always.
Yeah, and I certainly see it from my perspective. I'm very pro free speech and I'm very against kind of government intervention on a lot of things. But then there was that case, was it last year, I think, with where Stephen Bartlett was flagged for having so many people on who just said baseless claims, essentially. I'm a huge Joe Rogan fan, but I'll listen to some of his podcasts and think that's just crazy advice. Like, as you say, it's difficult to draw the line sometimes, but do you feel that's almost a good thing when things like that, the particularly like the Stephen Bartlett story, hit the mainstream because maybe it makes the general public suddenly go, oh, okay, just because that person's got 2 million followers doesn't mean they know everything?
I think when people get to that realization, yes, and I think that's a good thing because then people, generally the public perception and their awareness of health science develops because then they're able to say, okay, just because somebody's got doctor in front of the name, just because somebody's got 2 million followers, and conversely, just because somebody's got 1,000 followers doesn't mean anyone is better than the other, especially from an ethical point of view. But it's when they get to that stage. I think before that, there are a lot of people that will trust just because they've got doctor in front of the name and will trust it because it's just on a certain podcast. And that's where I then end up further down the line usually when the damage is done, whether that's relationship with food or them spending money and the supplement having zero impact, or even coming into some harm where, people have been using something either knowingly or unknowingly about its potential benefits, and then we're picking up on blood work and things like that it's actually done some harm.
To me, it's almost cult-like sometimes, as in I tend to try and avoid Instagram comments, but sometimes you get drawn in and I'll see someone who, I'll just pick an example here. Maybe it's like a carnivore diet and someone makes this basis claim that, the carnivore diet, and I could be wrong about this, but they'll say something like, oh, it completely removes all inflammation. It makes you immune to cancer and diabetes and you'll lose 30 pounds in 10 weeks. And someone might say, well, you've got no evidence for that. And they'll say, oh, well, I've been doing this for so long and it's done this for me. Like, okay, cool. still no evidence. Oh, well, my cousin's done it and they got great results in it. Cool, that's still no evidence. Oh, well, look at the, you need to go and read this book. And then I'm like, right, that's kind of like a cult, because if you talk to a cult member, they would tell you to go through that same process. It's like, well, it's done this for me. Oh, but look at these other people. And then they defer to one single source of authority. And you're like, unfortunately, it's very difficult to then explain someone with logic why they're not correct, because they're emotively bought in. So is there a way to solve that process, or do you think you have to wait till people are ready to hear not even another point of view, but to hear the more scientific point of view?
That's one of the best questions someone ever asked me.
Oh, fantastic.
So I struggle with this a lot. And I've got to a place where I've kind of arrived at, I will try to impart my advice to help someone, genuinely help them on what I think about something. Sometimes people are in a position where their readiness to change or how they want to be helped is not where it should be, or where they may want it to be in time. So my goal used to be that I would transform their view, which was silly because I don't even know why I had that goal in the first place, and I'd often leave conversations disappointed. But now it is just literally to help them in my way, to give them a thought, maybe leave them with a thought for something to, put their critical analysis on at a later date, and then I've done what I can. And by that, I don't mean try and sign them up to my coaching. Like some people, I get many messages on Instagram just asking me my views on something, and I will give it, even though it might not be what one of people want to hear. But I don't need to be nasty in how I say it. I can just give them that view, but every time I give that view, it will be from a meta-analysis. It'll be from what the average of the whole research says. Looking at forest plots, looking at kind of where the general direction of that, not one paper, certainly not just one book with one person's views, which again, it's amazing how many people will say, yes, I've got a reference for this. It's this book. And I go, that was written by one person whose views are very left wing. It's not that's not looking at the general consensus of the data, and I don't expect everybody to know that. But what I would say is my best advice for people is to be critical but open-minded. And if we can manage to hit that and the sweet spot in between, I think we're all in a better place. But especially in today's world where, like even going back to 2017 when I set Science to Health up, the misinformation, I don't think, was anything what it is now. And I think a lot of coaches had a passion of improving this, and if anything, it's got worse.
Yeah, I remember around that time the trend of like evidence-based nutrition was quite big, and that I guess came with its flaws as well, because that had cult-like elements too. But it certainly seemed like, as you say, there was a growing body of coaches who were trying to promote a more science-based form of dieting. But now, I suppose because it's what gets clicks and it's what get views and shares and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't really follow that much in the health and nutrition space anymore. Yet I can go to Instagram and the Explore page, and half of it will be, someone on a carnivore diet, someone else doing this, like a juice cleanse, for example. Someone else is doing, I don't know, what's that thing, 75 hard, anything like that. And you just think, yeah, it's just mad. But I suppose it does sell, and that's unfortunate. And I personally don't know if there's that much way to counteract that, apart from what you say, putting out good information, waiting until people are ready to hear a different way of doing things, and then kind of letting them make their own mind up for it.
Or the more latest ones, could you have low testosterone?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had a test?
Yes.
Yeah, I think most men above the age of 30, whenever they sit down with me now, that's coming up in every conversation. So yeah, there is trends with this as well. You can kind of predict trends within the consultations. Great point you make. I think that when people come to see me, I'm not usually the first line of approach for them. I'm usually at the end when they've tried lots of different things. They've made their own kind of conclusions, and then realise that they actually need something a little more long term. And throughout that journey, I wish it didn't have to take all of that for them to realise, which is where I think education and regulation of kind of company just go out and put these facts out for marketing. I think that needs to be regulated better. But yeah, I'm usually at the end where people will go, right, I've had enough of this now. I just need to speak to someone that isn't going to try and rip me off, and is actually going to try and help me with my long-term health at the forefront of the minds. I'm never usually the first line of attack.
Speaking of testosterone, what are you seeing around that at the minute? Because I've noticed it's a bit of a buzzword as well. Is it something guys should be very concerned with, on top of, or is it a bit of a, there might be a problem with it, but probably not?
I'll be honest, you do see suppression of testosterone in blood tests quite frequently between me and the doctor that's in my team. I take the blood. Me and the doctor do our interpretations. I'll be more looking at giving feedback from the nutrition and wellness side. He'll be on the medical side. And yeah, we are seeing, lower numbers. The causes are very different of what they may be. A lot of people who are overweight might have suppressed testosterone because of the changes in the hormones as a result of, their body composition. You can also see it in, a lot of overtraining where there's suppression of testosterone because there's not enough energy availability. So obviously, if you say you've got your income, which is the calories coming in, and then you've got your output, which is what they're burning in a week, and there's a massive tendency for overtraining. People just don't know the limits and just think more is better for achieving fitness, and it's very hard for them to calculate where the optimal dose for exercise is. And also, if you mix that with today's inspirational videos, it's very difficult for people to know that enough's enough. That's where I'm at my optimal. So as a result, once you discount the outgoings relative to the incomings, what they have left over for basic human function, i.e. reproductivity, just switches off. Because the body goes, just like a household would if someone had lost the job, say one of the key breadwinners had lost the job, what's the first thing that you do? Well, keeping a house warm and keeping water and food there is the essentials. So life, everything else is not needed. So reproductivity is optional. The body will switch it off, which also ties into the axis that looks after testosterone production. And then that suppresses massively. Then what happens then is a lot of men from the education that's put on social media thinks, right, I know the fix, go straight on test. Now that's a problem, that bit there, that decision that's just been made. A lot of them are not even testing as well. They just assume from the symptoms that that's what it is. Sometimes it's not, it's something else. So first of all, you need to test. Test, don't guess, as I like to say, and see where those numbers are at. Then, before you even decide to even look at exogenous, as in outside hormone kind of interventions, which if you're a tested athlete is an absolute no-go anyway. But you need to look at what's going on first. Can this be fixed naturally? I.e., do we actually just need to look at the relationship between incomings and outgoings, put them on a nutrition strategy to fix that? Because there might actually be nothing wrong with the apparatus, they're just not eating enough. But there's a tendency at the minute for men to just go straight on it. Also, I think there's peer pressure for men to look a certain way. But then the problems there is, with people taking testosterone, they're not being told about the risks. And the risks are there. They're in research. They're very evident. But a company marketing testosterone is probably not going to be, quick to highlight these risks. And they are cardiovascular issues because of the changes you get to the heart, impotence, struggles with, reproducing, mood and hormone fluctuations. The risks are very real, as well as I've picked up in many blood tests where people stop taking testosterone and they now can no longer produce it because they've had gonad failure. Because they've been so reliant on the exogenous testosterone, their own ability to produce it is now gone. And you can give it 12 months to try and recover. Some never do. So they then become permanently reliant on exogenous testosterone, which is sad because it's miseducation.
I think it's something that, from my perspective, isn't talked about nearly enough. And I remember going back to my brief bodybuilding stint again, I felt awful after I'd done a couple of shows, and I actually went and saw an endocrinologist. And I think my testosterone was something like 17% of what he'd expect it should have been. And I remember he gave me the option. He said, well, you could try, get your calories back up to normal, cut your cardio back, basically get back to living a normal life again. You'll probably be back up where you need to be in about 6 months. He said, or we could put you on TRT. And I don't really remember him saying much more than that. He was like, there are some downsides, but if you want to get up quicker, you could do that. And I just remember thinking, that's really weird. I'm 25 and you're recommending testosterone replacement. Surely the best way to do it is to have a go at it naturally, at least. But that stuck in my mind as being something where, like, even back then in 2015, when it wasn't as sort of widespread and well known about as now, I was thinking, I'm pretty sure you should be, more not forcing me, but definitely pushing me down the natural route a bit more. As a 25-year-old who had not yet had kids and kind of knowing a bit about the dangers of it, it just seemed very bizarre that he didn't seem to be trying to keep me away from going the medicated route.
And I will always go down the natural intervention first, especially if you're seeing low testosterone. It can have multiple causes in men. Now, there are some legit ones, which I've not touched on, where somebody's testosterone will remain low and they actually do need to go on testosterone because it's significantly affecting life quality. But there, like, say, for instance, there can be brain conditions, there can be, reasons why somebody's testosterone will be low and stay low. But we like to get to these conclusions first before we even look at, exogenous test.
And it almost seems trendy, and I'm sort of dating myself there by using the word trendy, but it almost seems quite in vogue, quite fashionable to be on TRT now, which is weird to me because compared to other interventions, like in previous years, it seems like if you're on weight loss pills back in the day, you wouldn't want people to know. But now guys almost wear this TRT thing like a badge of honor. I remember being at a seminar and one guy there was probably early 40s and was jacked and lean and everything, and said he got on TRT at about 35. He said, best thing I'd ever do or I've ever done, I'd recommend it to every guy. And I was thinking, that's just a bit mad to me. Like, I'm sure you can do it safely, but it just seemed bizarre.
Yeah, and I think when you sit down with somebody that has been living with like genuinely low testosterone for years and they did need exogenous test, that is life-changing for them. I don't certainly want to put a tainted light on it across the board. There are contexts where, it's a sincere life-changing medication. But the whole thing of this becoming normal across the board is dangerous. And yeah, like there's a lot of people as well that take tests that really don't need to. Their natural production of it is phenomenal, and they will already get kind of really good adaptations, especially if they're trying to gain muscle or perform. Then they really don't need to be going on it, and if anything, it's putting them in a worse state. It might be occupying from a mental health point of view for a short period of time the peer pressure of looking a certain way. But again, to me, in sitting down with a client and kind of assessing the pros and cons, I feel in that context the cons far outweigh the pros.
What other trends like that are you seeing?
Overtraining, as I touched on earlier. I think that people, especially with the videos and kind of rise and grind, sleep when you're dead. What was it? Who'll carry the boats?
Yes.
Yeah. Just create. Yeah. I mean, and some of the videos, they are inspirational, but you have to realise that. And I believe actually Dave Goggins has gone full circle on some comments he's made in terms of recovery is important. But I'm seeing it day in, day out, where it's like you are actually the odd one out saying, hang on a minute, what about recovery? People just thinking more is better. And I think that social media's got a lot to say for that in terms of, because that's conditioning people's views on things. But then the good thing is that we have kind of objective data, not subjective, that we can actually physically show some markers from testing in blood. You're overdoing it. And if anything, by doing more is not necessarily better. It's a dose-response relationship. You'll get to a point that you hit a peak of an inverted U. And anything past that, it's a cliff edge drop. And I think people either learn that the hard way, or they can look ahead and be, kind of forthcoming with it in preventing that through periodized training.
And it kind of seems to me that people almost want the sexy recovery stuff. So they want like the compression boot things, they want to do the ice baths, but then they're not prepared to go to bed earlier. They're not prepared to cut their training back, and they're not prepared to eat properly. This is a very loaded question, but would you agree with that? Or do you think actually... Yeah.
No, I would agree with that. I think whilst there's fantastic leaps in science that we're able to kind of, look at all the cool gadgets, which, some of them are, significantly you can help, but you should never, overlook the basics. because the percentages in terms of what things are going to give back, your diet, your training, managing the training load, and sleep are always going to be the three key ones. And that's coming from me, who is a coach and makes a living off being a coach. But I'm not afraid to say that they're the three key pillars that you've got to get right.
So let's say someone comes to you then, we'll say it's a guy, he's feeling signs of low testosterone. We won't say he's got low T, but he's feeling like that, under-recovered, performance is suffering. What would you look at, and what would be the few things that you'd expect to have to address in order to help him feel strong, energetic, train well, all that kind of stuff?
So the first thing when I sit down with this person is I've got an hour with them to do the baseline tests. I'm not going to get answers straight away. But I use that time as wisely as possible to find out about what their current life is like. And not just from a nutrition perspective either. I look at all the elements that can feed into how they're feeling and what current situation they're in. So I try to hope that they will trust me and open up and talk about personal life, any stresses that they've got professionally, personally, find out about them, find out about what the diet's like. Then find out about alcohol intake, general lifestyle, what sleep's like. So I'll do all those things first. Then I'll take a blood sample, metabolism test to find out how many calories their body requires, body composition scan, check how much body fat and muscle they've got, and also where it's stored. Then we wait for the bloods to come back. So then I'm kind of getting feedback from external factors like their lifestyle, and then internal factors to see what's going on under the hood in response to that going on. Then from there, once we get all them results, we then get clear clarity. So I usually test about 150 markers on the blood test. That's the most common one I do. So it looks at all the organ function, hormone function, nutrients, vitamins, minerals, everything I need to know really about how they're currently responding and what condition that they're in. Then we'll put a game plan together. The doctor will feed back on each marker. I will give the doctor all the information that I've just collected in that first session as well. And then me and the doctor, Dr. Lee, he will both sit down together and go, right, client Simon, let's discuss about that. What direction are we going in? I'll discuss from the nutrition elements, he'll discuss from the medical elements, and then we go back to that client. And we offer them, I don't really like kind of going, this is the way you're going. I like to give them the facts, see what they think about that, and then discuss options. But then those options can then be manipulated to where they think they're going to be most adherent to it. So we find a sweet spot between the two. You've got to get them to buy into the process and believe in it. Because when you get that, that's when the magic happens. But that is literally the walkthrough that I would do in that situation.
Are there any particular athletes in specific disciplines that you see tend to either really fall short with this kind of stuff, or actually other sports, other athletes who have it generally nailed down and it's just a few small tweaks they need?
No, it's hard. I think it's very much driven by the kind of ethos of the gym or your coaching team around you, and also the personality of the athlete. I think that massively differs, whereby some people just have this view that it is just kind of graft, kind of no pain, no gain. That's a dangerous mindset to have. But then there's others that are just kind of do everything spot on. Yeah. And then I try and sometimes think, what is it that's made you that way? How come you're so adherent? All your blood work matches that as well. Like if you're trying to find a model client in terms of training, recovery, doing everything right, think what can I take from there to try and, kind of input that into another athlete. And I think there's too many complex factors that tie into it to be able to point to something specific. I think it's your upbringing, it's your genetics, it's the conditioning, the learning that you've gathered from who you've spent time around. But what you can certainly do as a coach is show them the right way in terms of, I think this is where you might be going wrong. And they need that because sometimes they can't see it. And especially if you back it up with a test result. A genuine test result that actually shows this is an issue. What you're currently doing is causing you problems and you result in being suboptimal. Maybe, it's not a case of no pain, no gain. You need to start resting more. And that can really open people's minds.
I've certainly seen it getting into ultra running, that you do have those two very extreme ends of the spectrum, as in, on the one hand, you've got a lot of the elites now testing how many carbs can we tolerate per hour? They're really testing that quite strictly to get as much food as possible. They are really hot on their recovery. At the other end, you've got the classic ultra runner who, they're running sort of 100, 120 miles a week. They're eating 1,500 calories a day. They'll go out for a 5-hour run and not eat anything apart from maybe one energy gel. And they're getting up at 4 a.m. to go running again. And you're like, it's one sport, but there's so many extremes within that it's, that just plays into your point, I guess. It's very individualized as well. And it probably depends on who you follow online. That must be a big one now. In your kind of whole ethos, really, are you more of a smart trainer, or are you more of a no pain, no gain person?
Yeah, and I think there's a sweet spot between the two, because there's some of these athletes that I just don't know what drives them. They're just mentally unbeatable, and I'm sometimes in awe of them, of them getting up every morning without fail, kind of consistency that I would only dream of. When I look at me in terms of keeping myself fit, and I look and I think, wow, like that is just unbelievable. But then some of the game they're missing is that they don't know when to stop, and also it usually comes. Some people are good at what they do. Some people are good despite what they do, not because of what they do. And that's where the science can come in and go, okay, well, you've got a lot of talent here. But when I mentioned before about unnecessary suffering, if we can just take some of that away and then actually flip that to being optimal, and then that's supporting that strong mindset and the talent that they've got, that can only be a good thing.
And your own sporting background, I think you said you've done some marathons, Ironman, training for high rocks as well, did you say?
Bit of everything.
Nice.
Yeah.
What have you seen as the differences in approaches between everything you've done? Have you stayed fairly consistent with your, what you do, kind of calorie intakes, food choices, that kind of thing? Or does it change quite a bit depending on what sport you're doing?
I've learned things from I wouldn't ever change this. I've learned things from the client's point of view, really, where I've massively got things wrong. I would actually say for me individually, I'm currently in good nick. But when I did Ironmans, you get very much used to the amount of food that you can eat, and the sheer time constraints of training for an Ironman, the impact that has on running a business, being a dad, being a husband. It's very easy not to get that balance right, and I've certainly come close to paying the price with that. But then also from an eating point of view, you just get used to eating that much, and then when the training stops, it really puts you in a position of, I can see where my clients notice this now, and the difficulty to keep the weight off. And I think I put about 3 stone on. It wasn't just with the changes in training. It was also the stresses of running a business, the kind of, even when you're trying the best you can to be on it, there's still unpredictabilities, and it just puts you in the real world. But that's also where I have a different view on, you can't just go off how somebody looks. I see deeper than that, in terms of the person's knowledge. Like they may be going through something. That doesn't mean that they're not experts. But in our industry, we do kind of, I would say not from everybody, but there is a strong judgment in terms of you are your shop window, and that dictates what you do or don't know.
Yeah, the calorie one is interesting. We had previous guest in, Jack, and I was speaking to him, and he's, like really in shape bodybuilder, holds a lot more muscle mass than me. But he was saying about his whole thing is that he only trains 3 times a week because of his family. He doesn't do a lot of activity, and he diets on about 1,800 calories. And I'm here on a very, I'm dieting a bit myself at the moment, but doing ultras, I'm probably a good sort of 10 kilos lighter than him, a lot less muscle mass. I'm dieting on like 3,000 calories. And to me, it's almost scary that I to have to go to that low level, that I can absolutely see if you stop the ultra endurance stuff, all of a sudden I'd be like, I really miss that food. I would probably get very large very quickly, I think.
Yeah, and that's when people say about in terms of developing a mindset or a habit. So say when somebody changes, goes, like say, for example, this aggressive diet program that I've just done, lost 12 kilos doing it in 6 weeks. I then adapted to maintenance, but that is set to my current life of what it's like now. The training that I do, the lifestyle that I have, the day-to-day routine is pretty straight for me. But then if something changes, like whether it's personal or professional, those habits and that lifestyle that I formed was only set to that way of life. If that then massively changes or does a 360, like finishing, I would have thought back 2016, I would have been doing Ironmans for life. Very quickly got tired of it. So then whatever phase of life I then go into, I'm not set for that anymore. But nobody usually ever changes that in terms of the coaching around it and things like that. I've got many clients that have kept weight off. I still see from 6 years ago when I worked with them, and they've still kept 5 stone off. But then sometimes clients come back. Somebody that was close to me died in my life, or something happened in an abusive relationship, or I lost a certain job, or I don't do that training anymore because I got injured. There's so many different reasons of why things can change. And we're sat in these habits sometimes for where we are in life, but that can change.
And I guess that's when what works on paper doesn't always translate to the real world, because people aren't these, mindless drones that just can follow instructions. Even dedicated, disciplined people, as you say, something can happen. It's just like, well, that goes out the window. And whether it's overeating, whether it's just body doesn't demand as many calories anymore. Yeah, I guess that's the mark of a good coach, is someone who isn't just like, well, you need to follow the plan and that's it. It's like, okay, how can we adapt this to the current situation?
Yeah, and that's where sometimes in my earlier days coaching, I would be a little bit more like a robot, which didn't do me any favors. You would say, why can't you just do it? Just do it. But then you're not understanding, as I've got older and had a child and run a business, and you start to appreciate, well, when you're on it, so to speak, as many people use that phrase, as in following a program, you can be very dialed in for that short period of time, and your body can really home in and focus on what you've got to do. But then that's only short-lived, because then things will change, stress will come in, something will divert you a little bit and divert your attention. And it's then that you've really got to develop skills to manage that, so that what you've learned, or the composition that you got yourself in, provided it was a long-term goal, can be sustained, because you're just going to go through so many different phases. Yeah. And I just think a lot of programs don't set people up for that.
Is there anything that you've particularly changed your mind on over the years? Something you used to really believe with all your heart that now you're like, no, I don't think I was right about that?
Picking individual instances, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there definitely is. I'd say electrolytes is one of them. I used to literally swear by them for every single person, as in, like, if you're training, you've got to have electrolytes, because otherwise you will cramp. It will affect your performance. And then now today's marketing behind it is, if you're not having electrolytes, you may as well turn the car around and not go to the gym. And that's not the case. And I only actually think, put the marketing aside for a moment, I think that electrolytes are only needed in very specific contexts, i.e. ultra endurance sport, because then you will be significantly losing sodium at a rate that can affect body function. And in cases where I'm working with weight-making athletes, that they will lose a lot of sodium on fight week from doing a cut because of the amount of sweat that leaves the body. Other than that, the body regulates it very, very well. And what a lot of people don't realise is that when you sweat and that sodium and sweat is on your skin, some people can be very good at retaining that sodium. Like the skin reabsorbs it and regulates it at a certain level. There's decent research in even Ironman athletes where they've tested the sodium at the beginning and at the end, and it's hardly budged. So when we're looking now at what most people do, which is like an hour's gym session, we're not going to be at any kind of significant impact that is going to affect the performance in that time. And we're in a time in modern world where there's enough salt in the diet anyway, and in fact, more than enough. Going on to UPFs, ultra processed foods, another topic, but literally in most cases, they're not needed, contrary to marketing. Now everybody's got them in the drink.
Yeah, well, I remember I was very surprised, because I'd always assumed that I was quite a high salt sweater, and then went for a sweat test probably about a year ago, I think. And I had always, in races, I would always have a 500ml flask. I'd just whack an electrolyte in each one, and that would just be what went down. And my fingers were getting very swollen. And I got told that's either, and this, you may well tell me this is incorrect, but I got told that could either be not enough salt or too much salt. So I assumed, well, it's got to be not enough salt, surely. So crammed in even more electrolytes, had this sweat test. Actually, you're a low salt sweater. I was like, oh, okay. Switched to just doing half in each bottle, sometimes just drinking plain water. Yeah, touch wood, not had swollen fingers since. So that goes to show, I guess, that, well, it doesn't go to show, it's an N equals 1 example, but for me at least, actually following the advice of just have electrolytes, you need them, well, yeah, I needed some, but not nearly as much as I have been doing.
Yeah, that's a great example. You can get hyponatremia in terms of if salt or electrolytes, the ingestion of them actually helps you retain fluid. So when you take electrolytes, it impacts a receptor in the brain, which then will make you drink more fluid. I'll give you an example. If you've had, say, for instance, a really salty takeaway meal, like a pizza, and then you drink while you're having it, you can actually feel the drink glugging in, like falling in. It's really kind of palatable to be able to drink that drink because of the salt content. And that's because the body tries to regulate the balance between water and sodium. When that balance is upset, the body will let the water out. But if you say you're having too much, it can actually start to waterlog the cells. And that's when we can start to swell. In extreme cases, people have died from it, where the advice previously in like marathons was drink as much as possible. And that's dangerous. You should now, we know you should drink to measure your sweat rate, and your fluid intake should be a percentage of that. You don't need to drink everything back that you lose. But yeah, it used to be drink as much as possible, and people have died from following that because they've literally waterlogged themselves. So yeah, you had inherent knowledge of the science, and then you've adapted it to your N=1, which I think is wise.
And if you had an athlete come to you and said, look, I want to get a bit more clued up on the actual science behind nutrition, where's a good place for them to start?
Depends which element of nutrition. If they're looking at supplements, then I'd literally just say, look, if you've got a supplement that you want to find out about, go and search for it on examine.com, because that way it's research backed. There's a team there that are not there to sell supplements. They are literally there just to be impartial and tell you the facts and findings on that from the research that we do have. If you're wanting to find out about nutrition generally in the nutrition space, and you want to listen to a podcast that isn't full of sales tactics, I've said this since I first ever listened to each podcast in 2014, and it's still going now. Danny Lennon, Sigma Nutrition. They would be my two go-tos, essentially, for if you enjoy the science and you want to find out a bit more about the science, go and look at those two resources, and I don't think you'll go far wrong.
Love it. Cool. We'll do my quick fire 5 in a minute, but first, Sam, if people want to find a bit more about you and get in touch, what's the best place for them to go to?
Sciencetohealth.com or on Instagram at Sciencetohealthuk.
Amazing. Cool. So quick fire 5, and you might have actually answered the first one in the previous question I asked you, but what would be, well, we'll adapt the question. Normally the question is, what business, copywriting, marketing or mindset book would you recommend someone and why? But we'll branch out to nutrition, and it could be another podcast. It could be, I hesitate to say documentary, but maybe it's a documentary. But what one other resource would you recommend people go to learn about what you do?
I would certainly recommend Professor Asker Ukendrup's My Sports Science Academy. That's just a one-stop shop for all things nutrition, and will really help people, whether they're just starting out, in uni or in college, or whether they've just started doing the job and they're working with people on the front line, so to speak. And it really helps them both from a theoretical point of view and a practitioner's point of view. I would also say, I always try to, I'm not really much of a book reader, so you're probably only going to get different kind of resources from me. I know I read research a lot, but that's not for everybody. I do that because I have to for my job. But another course that I definitely recommend would be MNU for Nutritionists, run by Martin McDonald. I just think it upskills people really, really well, in not just the scientific backing, but how to actually deal with and help people and the different behaviours that they may demonstrate and how you can coach them.
Nice. Yeah, I know I've got a lot of friends who've done that and they always speak highly of it. So yeah, perfect. Question number 2, we're going for a coffee and I'm buying. What's your order?
Caramel cappuccino without fail.
Nice. Nice to hear a not overly strict option from a nutritionist.
No.
Question number 3, you're in charge of the internet for a day and you can get rid of one social media platform. Which do you want to get rid of and why?
I would get rid of Instagram, but only a certain element of it.
Okay.
I would then kind of reinvent it, so to speak, but it would be regulated for the information that goes out, especially on health science.
I could go with that. Yeah, I'm typically not a fan of regulation, but in this case, I think we can make an exception.
Okay.
So
Yeah, okay.
Good. Question number 4. You're hosting a dinner party and can have any 3 people living or dead. Who do you want to invite?
Any 3. I've been struggling with this one ever since you gave me the heads up on the question. I was actually thinking whilst we were talking. One of them would definitely be Gary Brecker, because I'd just like to ask him where his mindset is at. You know, the things that he says, while I'm quite aware of why he might say them, but I would just ask what legacy do you think that's going to leave? And I would just have an open discussion with him about the impacts that some of the things that he said and the advice that he's give to millions of people that just doesn't sit right with me. And yeah, I would that would be in the view of, as I said before, of getting information regulated for the future.
I like that. We don't normally have someone pick someone who they'd have a potentially controversial discussion with. So no, I think that'd be cool.
Yeah. Who else would be? Paul Smith, the comedian, because I find him hilarious. And it looks like looking in the mirror. And who would the third one be? Probably Danny Lennon.
Nice.
Because I was thinking we'd have something funny, something educational, and something controversial.
Yeah, I like it. And he'd probably back up your points in the discussion with Gary, I suppose.
Feed my ego.
Yeah. Seems like a perfect mix. Yeah. And then final question is, if there's someone who wants to get where you are, emulate what you've done in your career, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
This will be controversial because I was actually thinking about this in the car. I would say if you want to be a nutrition coach, then just be aware when you leave uni, you do not know it all, even though you might think you do. Do MNU. I think it's a great starting point. But then as a business owner, I would say slow down. I've learnt that the hard way, definitely. Trying to rush things, do everything that you think needs to be done. There's information coming at you from all angles. People tell you to do it this way, do it that way. There's people push you, say, I want this yesterday. And I think that, to have a true happy life, I think, yes, there does need to be some self-development going on because it's so rewarding and it feels amazing to know that you're on a path of development and progress, but try not to rush it. Because I think that when you try to do that, I feel that it literally takes away a lot of the enjoyment that you can have because all you feel like you're running on is adrenaline, and that affects your time with your family. It affects your mental health, and it actually stops you from enjoying the process. So I would say slow down and focus on doing quality work.
Fantastic. I agree entirely. Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. That was an awesome episode. Really enjoyed that. So I will post all the links to everything from today's episode down in the description. So links if you want to go and get in touch with Sam. There'll also be the normal links for the FKS templates, the course, the free class, all that kind of stuff. Again, thanks so much for watching. Like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And I shall catch you on the next episode.